Nebraska season is almost here, and I recently polled you, the fans, to see your biggest questions for the Huskers going into the fall. So in today's video, I'm joined with a special guest, Justin Adams, with the Nebraska Voice of College Football, and we're going to be answering your biggest concerns going into the fall for Nebraska. So Justin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. Ready to dive in these questions and get some answers for the people before we head into the season.
All right, let's start it off with the number one question that I received. And this was about the offensive line. So, of course, Nebraska has not had the greatest offensive line over the last half decade. Now, last year, it improved rapidly throughout the season. A lot of guys are coming back for their super senior campaign. So, this person asked, who do you believe is going to be the highest graded Nebraska offensive lineman in 2024? Justin, I'll start off with you.
Yeah, so for me, it's Micah Mazuka. And looking at his previous year, he had a 74.9 grade, which is 22nd among interior offensive linemen and would have been the highest graded Nebraska offensive lineman according to PFF on 752 or 759 snaps, 6'5", 331. And he plays well against big competition. He seems to get better against the better competition. So I think Michael Mazuka is going to be a huge part of this line, and I want to see what Raiola can do with him and see how he can develop him this offseason and see what he's turned him into a little bit. So excited to see what we get from him for sure.
Yeah, that was a big transfer addition coming in from Florida. My pick is going to be another transfer addition, not this year, but last year. Ben Scott there at the center position. Again, that's a guy who is not the sexy pick, not a tackle, not a guard, but man, is he productive for Nebraska. Just a senior leader, a guy who's going to be representing the Huskers this week at Big Ten Media Days. And I mean, yeah, really productive season. I think he's going to prove that he should go to the NFL. So those guys are our picks, Ben Scott and Micah Mazuka. But I know we both feel the same way about the offensive line. It's honestly has some pretty good depth there. Of course, Bryce Benhart, a guy who played pretty good last season despite some of the struggles earlier in his career. You feel good about Teddy Prohaska being healthy, Turner Corcoran being healthy, guys like Henry Tufsky. So the offensive line looking very good for Nebraska, but those are our picks. Now, let's take it to the second question here. And this one we've gotten a lot as well in regards to the Colorado game. Man, is that game hyped up? And this person asked, what's the number one key to the game for Nebraska in order to get the win versus the Buffs?
You want me to start?
Yep.
All right. So this is what I thought should be the game plan, or what was the number one key last year that we didn't execute. And the trick against Colorado is going to be establishing your offensive game plan. So we need to go after their lack of depth, their lack of size in the trenches. We need to establish that run game and get the lead early. Last year, we didn't establish that run game. We didn't get a chance to wear down that smaller defensive line, and we had to play catch up. We had to start throwing the ball. So Nebraska needs to get out to an early lead and be able to control the pace of the game the way that they want to, and don't play behind Colorado and let them spread them out and then force us into a game plan that we don't want to execute.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Again, play your game, have the tempo be on your end, not on Colorado's end. Even when Nebraska was coming back against the Buffaloes last year, you still felt like Colorado would win because they controlled the pace of the game. They were going fast paced down the field. The defense couldn't get off for the Huskers, and for that reason, they blew the lead wide open in the third and fourth quarters. So that's definitely key to the game for me. But my big thing for the Huskers is to have a good performance in the secondary. Now, say what you want about Colorado's team and the lack of depth on the offense and defensive lines. Now, there's only one position that you can feel really good about the Buffaloes having a lot of talent in, and that's the wide receiver core. And that same wide receiver core tore Nebraska up in the second half last year. And this is not really a better cornerback room for the Huskers. So you really need guys like Tommy Hill to have a great game, Isaac Gifford, Sayer Wright, and hopefully even Bly Hill might be available against Colorado. So definitely something that I want to look for is that DB versus wide receivers matchup. If you can shut down their passing attack even a little bit and force them to run the football, you're going to be in for a good game. So those are our two keys to the game versus Colorado. Let's take it to the defensive line now. Arguably, let's just not even say that. This is the best positional group on the team for Nebraska. Lots of depth, a lot of guys who are proving they should be NFL draft picks this spring. Who do you think will be the sack leader for the Huskers?
This one was hard, right? Because you got like guys like Len Hart and Jamari Butler who showed out last year in terms of sacks. But then you got your guys like Ty and Nash. You know, you got Nash on the nose, which typically in nose doesn't get you those type of numbers and typically doesn't get you those kind of stats. But in a 3-3-5, it's a little different because you have a zero nose and you're playing a two gap system, right? And they don't want to necessarily double team. So when you're having guys, you know, come in from slashing in from the linebacker position and trying to throw off, you know, the offensive linemen's, you know, looks and who they're going to be guarding, who they're going to be protecting. And Nash coming off of this year of wrestling and learning how to move people, you know, Nash was what third in sacks last year on the team. And I think he has a chance to, even though it's a nose, I don't really like to pick noses, you know, to lead the league, lead the team in sacks. Looking at Tony White's Syracuse defenses, it was either defensive ends or linebackers usually that led the team in sacks. It was usually a rotation of either of those and a combination. Sometimes some DB snuck in there. But I think Nash is something like he's never had on the interior of a defensive line before. So I expect Nash to actually, you know, surprise some people and be the sack leader.
Yeah, I think we both agree that Nash is the best defensive lineman for Nebraska. But
Yep.
for that exact reason, I don't think he leads the team in sacks because of how good he is. He's going to have to force offenses to adjust to him and force him to, again, get on double teams. And that'll open up some opportunities for guys like Ty Robinson, guys like Jamari Butler. Now, what's interesting about Ty Robinson is although he only had one sack last year for Nebraska, he had the highest quarterback hurry rate out of anybody for the Huskers. Now, I think he gets some more sacks. Now, but I will say, I think the sack leader will once again be Jamari Butler. He's the most talented, just true pass rusher for Nebraska, has the biggest arsenal, and I do believe he has an NFL ceiling. Now, one wild card I'll throw out there is Princewell Umanmielen. Man, I really feel good about his ceiling. I think he breaks out in a big way for the Huskers. So that's our picks for the sack leaders on the D line. But let's start to talk about some of the seniors. This is a very senior-led team for Nebraska for the first time in a long time. Now, let's just fast forward to the spring. Who do you think will be the highest drafted Nebraska Cornhusker and where? Like what round?
So for me, it's going to be Tommy Hill. Right. And the reason I think this is, of course, you saw my video probably, well, or some people may have, about my video about Tommy Hill being one of the most slept on players on Nebraska's team. And I think more people are coming around to Tommy Hill in recent weeks. But yeah, for me, it's Tommy. The growth that he had last year, you know, talking about the year before, where at the Rutgers game, he was literally in the wide receiver room for depth. And now they turned him into a defensive back his first season, kind of fully in the defensive back room, and he just progressively got better as the season went along. And like I've said many times before, he was graded with the likes of Kool-Aid McKinstry, Kamari Lassiter, who both went in the second round, picks 41 and 42, right behind Cooper DeJean in this past year's draft. This last year's draft was very, very offensive heavy early on. Defensive backs went later in this draft. They didn't start going until the late first, early second. So I think that might switch around this year, and I think the defensive backs might have a leg up this year. So I think Tommy Hill might venture in around that mid-second, early second round range personally.
Yeah, I completely agree. Tommy Hill is my pick as well. I mean, this is a guy who gets it done both in man-to-man coverage and along with zone coverage. And like you said, yeah, he was in the wide receiver core about 2 years ago. Of course, his true freshman year at Arizona State, he was in the secondary, but super talented, about as talented as any DB we've seen for Nebraska in the past half decade. And we've seen a lot of NFLers. So my pick is probably around that third, fourth round range for Tommy. Again, it's going to be a little bit of a better DB draft class this year. But, man, Tommy Hill, about as talented as it gets. But there's a lot of guys who you feel confident enough to say they're going to get drafted very high. Jamal Banks will get drafted. Michael Mazuka likely will get drafted. Ben Scott. I could see about maybe 6, 7 guys for the Huskers hear their name called in April. But let's go to the secondary. Speaking of Tommy Hill, you can pencil him in at cornerback 1. But there is a battle throughout fall ball. Who is going to be cornerback 2? Now, we likely think that's going to be Sire Wright, but I want to get your take on this. When Bly Hill comes back from injury, likely in the middle of the year, will he earn that cornerback 2 job, or will it stay with Sire Wright or whoever earns it during the fall?
I think it's going to go to Bly. And this could be my love affair with Bly, but to me, Bly Hill fits a prototypical cornerback a lot better. He's a little bit longer in rangier. He's a little bit taller. Sierra Wright's about 6 foot. I think Bly Hill's around 6'2", 6'3". So he's got the longer, rangier arms. And also, I just think he fits the traits of a more prototypical cornerback. Sierra Wright, of course, had a break from football, and we don't know what to necessarily expect from him. We know he's going to be very good, but also Bly Hill, being as young as he is, has a few more years, and we know, Matt Rhule likes to develop those guys that have the multiple years behind them. But it all comes down to when he comes back from injury, those type of deals. But I do think that Bly Hill will be the starter when he comes back. I do think right now he's the better of the two. He knows the system, he knows the culture, he knows Matt Rhule and the staff better. So yeah, I think Bly's going to step in. I think Sierra will be there to rotate in and kind of be there for depth as well.
Yeah, I agree. Again, just going back to what Matt Rhule was saying throughout spring ball, again, he's speaking glowingly about Bly Hill and what he was doing on the field. Now, it just goes back, in my opinion, to how well Sierra Wright plays throughout those first couple of games. They're completely two different corners. Again, Sierra Wright is a guy who's a true man-to-man corner, about only 6 foot tall. And then Bly Hill, in my opinion, a little bit more of a nickel corner, listed at 6'3", maybe not as fast and explosive, but definitely as productive and honestly a lot more polished than Sierra Wright. So I agree. I think when Bly Hill comes back, he's going to earn that cornerback 2 job, but definitely something to watch throughout fall camp. Of course, Bly will not be available. Does Sierra Wright win that at least to start the year? Or do we see maybe an underdog like a true freshman, Mario Buford, Larry Tarver, even a Dwight Boodle? Now, speaking of fall ball, in my video yesterday, I talked about the quarterback 2 position for Nebraska. Of course, Dylan Raiola is quarterback 1, no questions about that. But Heinrich Haarberg will likely be battling Jalen Gramstad to back him up. Who do you think wins that battle? And talk about Jalen Gramstad and what you could see from his transition to NAIA football to the Power 5.
Yeah. Well, first up, I think it's going to be Haarberg, just because of Haarberg's experience. I think Haarberg just knows the system very well. He knows the playbook inside and out, as he's been in multiple position rooms and learned multiple positions. I think he's done enough to at least cement himself as that guy to back up Raiola if need be. Of course, we've talked about this before, but Danny Kaelin just quite isn't ready yet. He still needs that year of development. Jalen Gramstad very much could come in there and also cause some noise and be able to make that a competition. But I think right now with, Gramstad was great. Gramstad, was excellent, but I don't know if he necessarily has exactly what they're looking for to be able to stretch the field as much as they want to. I know Haarberg doesn't really have the best deep ball accuracy, but it seemed like maybe he improved. So if he did improve upon that, maybe they feel a little bit better about him. But I do think maybe it could be a 1A, 1 or 2A, 2B type of deal, where it could be an or on the depth chart, because potentially if they want Haarberg in a different position room, then they might have Jalen Gramstad at 2, just so they can move Haarberg around and not have to have him as the second emergency quarterback. So, but I'm going to pencil in Haarberg there as the number 2 guy, just due to his experience and his knowing of this offense.
Yeah, we're on the same wavelength about that when it comes to, Haarberg having that leg up, being with Matt Rhule for about a year and a half now. Jalen Gramstad's just getting on campus. Now, I will say this about Jalen. He's a winner. I mean, he won throughout his college career. He won in high school, a state title. He would not go to Nebraska to be a third string in his final year of eligibility. He's going to fight like hell to get some playing time. So I definitely think he's going to come to Lincoln with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. But the fact of the matter is he is a little bit behind. He's got to learn the playbook, learn the speed of the game. It's a huge transition from the level of football he was playing to Power 5. And I do think Heinrich Haarberg is that guy to start the year, at least looking at what Matt Rhule was saying. Matt Rhule said that he wouldn't be surprised if Gramstad even is quarterback 4. He said he doesn't know. He said he could be quarterback 2, could be quarterback 4. That should tell you everything you need to know. But that is something, again, to watch throughout fall practice. Who wins that quarterback 2 job? Is it even a real competition? But let's go to one more question we got from a viewer, a little bit of a fun one to cap things off. Nebraska has a very good team this year, at least the best we've seen in the last decade, half decade. But if you could add any Husker player from the last 5 years to this team, who would it be?
All right. So there's a couple of different avenues we could have took here. We could have went with the best player, or we could have went with the position of need. I tried to do a combination of both. So I went with Cam Taylor-Britt. Now, Cam Taylor-Britt, of course, Very physical. He has great speed. He's very handsy. He can press. He can do press man. He can play in zone. He's gotten a lot better with his ball skills, and he is a effort player. You remember him just being a guy who flies all over the field and makes the game-winning plays. He's made a few game-winning plays just going up with his ball skills, be able to go up and track the ball, knock it down with his hands. Great body control, great pursuit speed, great recovery ability. Cam Taylor-Britt is just a football player through and through, and he makes your team better no matter what.
Yeah, I was going back and forth on who I wanted to pick here. Cam Taylor-Britt was definitely one of them, but I think I'm going to go with O'Shawn Mathis. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Not
Oh,
O'Shawn Mathis. That just popped in my head. I just remembered him. I was like, that would be funny. No, not Cam, not him. I got to go with the obvious answer. Trey Palmer. Again, it was either him or Cam. Trey Palmer, just an absolute gamer, the best Nebraska wide receiver, arguably in the history of this program. And yeah, I mean, he would be a security blanket for Dylan Raiola, to say the least, and he would make this offense legit. So, all right, that's our picks for adding any Nebraska player to this team. But those are some of your biggest questions going into the year. Man, this is a hyped up season for Nebraska. The summer has flown by. But I want to thank you, Justin, for joining me on my channel for this video. And everybody go check him out there at the Nebraska Voice of College Football. And if you made this far in the video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. And as always, folks, go Big Red, go Matt Rhule, and see you in the next one.